Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to our witnesses today. Let me, as a former law enforcement officer, as you well know, my committee members of 27 years, I'm not quite really sure what to think of a lot of what I've heard so far. Let me just get one thing out of the way. There is an effort on this committee to try to hijack this important hearing about the safety of our students and the safety of the people that we are supposed to represent and assist law enforcement in protecting. Let me say it for about the millionth time. We are not going to defund the police. We're going to fund the police. And we can have the backs of our police officers and the communities in which we serve too. The communities most at risk from crime want more security, not less. We know that when you do get out and talk to them. That's why we're working to get police departments more resources, not less. And it's why we need to expand the nonprofit security grant program, which I am working on in my other committee through Homeland Security. And from what I've heard today from some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I am sure that I will be able to get many more of them to sign on to that legislation. Our number one priority has to be the reduction of violent crime. I have been saying that for over 3 decades. But let me be clear, that also includes escalating threats by extremists targeting Black Americans and Jewish Americans and Sikh Americans and others. I have to wonder, let me say this. I have worked alongside the brave men and women in blue that many of my colleagues talk about. I have seen them risk their lives over and over again to keep all, not just a few, all communities safe. And what I know from my experience is that those police officers, those rank and file officers would be extremely concerned about the safety of students and threats against students in their communities. Madam Chair, I invite my colleagues to get to truly know some of the law enforcement officers, some of the rank and file officers that they talk about and claim to know. Dr. Wilson, thank you for your leadership at Morgan, and thank you for your powerful testimony, advocating on behalf, laser focused on advocating on behalf of those students who are just trying to get an education and are dependent on us to make sure that they can. Last week, you wrote an opinion piece for Word in Black entitled HBCU Strong. Bomb threats will not deter us. Dr. Wilson, how would you say the history, because we know the history. I mean, we know it, but let's move better. Let's try to get better moving on. How would you say the history shapes the campus environment today? And I know you talked a little bit earlier, but could you talk a little bit more about how your students are handling these threats and how are you addressing the issues? And please tell me how having to now take away resources to respond to threat after threat after threat has really affected this, what should be a safe learning environment.
Thank you very much for the question, Congresswoman Demings. Let me repeat that the psychological trauma that has been brought on by the threats is very, very severe here at Morgan and across the HBCU campuses. I do not say that in a vacuum. I certainly have been in conversations with the other HBCU presidents and chancellors And what you see at Morgan is no different than what you will see on the other campuses where these threats have also been made. Number two, there, of course, is a long history of underfunding of these institutions. And as such, there's a reason why I said they are the innovators in American higher education, because they've had to, quote unquote, take what they had to make what they needed in order for the students, when they walked across the stage and they got those sheepskins, to be in a position to dance on the world stage with anyone, any place, anytime, anywhere. When you add the bomb threats and you add, if you will, the impact of the pandemic, and when you add all of the other things that these students have seen in a relatively short period of time, what these underfunded resource institutions must do is then to take resources from other operational areas and then shift them to the psychological, emotional well-being area. And therefore, it limits our ability to continue to advance the genre of institutions. That's the way I would explain that in a relatively short period of time, Congresswoman Demings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson.
Gentlelady's time.